Today, we're diving into one of the most chaotic and transformative periods in modern Indian history, a time so volatile it's literally been called the dangerous decade. It's an incredible story of crisis, power struggles, and complete reinvention, and it all kicks off with the death of India's very first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru.
So, in May of 1964, these two questions were on everyone's mind. Now, after Nehru, who? That's about the immediate political successor. A big deal for sure. But after Nehru, what? That was the really terrifying question. Would India's entire democratic experiment, so unique among all these newly independent nations, even survive without the man who had led it from the very beginning?
And look, this wasn't just a fear inside India. As you can see from this quote from the London Times in 1967, a lot of people outside the country were watching and just waiting for it all to fall apart. They really thought India would collapse into chaos or maybe even a military dictatorship, just like so many other post-colonial states had. The stakes were just unbelievably high.
Okay, so let's dig into what happened right after Nehru's death and look at the first major tests for this young democracy.
Well, the transition was anything but smooth. First, the soft-spoken Lal Bahadur Shastri takes over. But his time in office is just slammed by a war with Pakistan and a massive food crisis. Then, in January 1966, he dies suddenly while in Tashkent. So, can you believe it? India is facing a second leadership vacuum in less than 2 years. This time, the party lands on Nehru's daughter, Indira Gandhi. But the story behind her rise to power is really fascinating. You see, the powerful old guard of the Congress Party, a group known as the Syndicate, they were the ones who pushed for her. And why? Well, they thought she was politically inexperienced, a gunji gudiya, or a dumb doll, as one leader called her. They figured she'd just be a figurehead they could easily control from behind the curtain. And let me tell you, that was a decision that was going to backfire spectacularly.
So, barely a year after becoming Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi has to lead her party into a general election. And the results of that 1967 election would send shockwaves through the entire country, earning it a very fitting name, a political earthquake. You have to understand, the mood in the country leading up to this election was just terrible. India was suffering from 2 straight years of failed monsoons, which led to severe food shortages. Prices for everything were just skyrocketing. And to make matters even worse, the government had devalued the Indian rupee under pressure from the U.S. People were angry, and that anger was spilling onto the streets in the form of protests, strikes, and shutdowns all over the nation.
It was in this climate of absolute discontent that a new, very clever political strategy popped up. Championed by the socialist leader Ram Manohar Lohia, it was called non-Congressism. And the logic was really simple. The opposition parties, who had completely different ideologies, realized that the only reason the Congress Party kept winning was because their own votes were always split. So they decided to team up, putting all their differences aside for one single goal: get the Congress Party out of power. And the results? They were absolutely stunning. As you can see here, the Congress Party's seat count in the Lok Sabha just plummeted. They barely hung on to a majority. Think about this. Half of Indira Gandhi's cabinet ministers lost their own elections. And at the state level, it was a bloodbath. Congress lost power in 9 states. The era of one-party dominance in India was officially over.
So what happens when you get these messy results with razor-thin majorities? Well, you get a brand new, chaotic political phenomenon: defection. All of a sudden, individual politicians realized they had immense power. They could literally make or break entire governments just by switching sides, which led to, you guessed it, total instability.
And nothing, I mean nothing, captures this chaos better than this story. In 1967, a politician in Haryana named Gaya Lal defected from his party to the Congress. Okay, but then, just 9 hours later, he defected back to his original party. When he was presented to the press, a party leader famously said, "Gaya Ram was now Aya Ram." That phrase, Aya Ram, Gaya Ram, which literally means Ram came, Ram went, it became a famous expression for this kind of political horse trading that was happening all over the country.
All right, let's move on. Because the biggest challenge for Indira Gandhi wasn't actually coming from the opposition anymore. No, it was coming from inside her own house, from the very same syndicate leaders who had put her in power in the first place.
So you basically had 2 giant forces on a collision course. On one side, you had the syndicate, the powerful, old-school party bosses who controlled the party machine and expected Indira to just do what they said. And on the other side, you had Indira Gandhi herself, who was determined to be her own boss and push for a more populist, left-leaning agenda. She started building her own team of advisors from outside the party, and pretty soon, a massive showdown was just inevitable. And the battleground for this internal war for the soul of the party? It turned out to be the 1969 presidential election. Now, this wasn't just about choosing a new president for the country. This was a proxy fight for who truly controlled the Congress Party.
Okay, so here's the play-by-play. The syndicate nominated their guy, N. Sanjeeva Reddy, as the official Congress candidate against Indira's wishes. So what does she do? In an absolutely brilliant countermove, she quietly encourages the vice president, V.V. Gary, to run as an independent. And then she goes public and openly defies her own party, calling for a conscience vote, which was basically a secret code for all of her supporters to vote for Gary, not the official party candidate. It was an incredibly risky move.
And the result? A stunning victory for Indira's candidate, V.V. Giri. She had taken on the titans of her own party, and she had won. Well, the party bosses were furious. The Congress president actually expelled her from the party. This whole showdown led to a formal split. The syndicate's faction became known as Congress O for organization, and Indira's new faction became Congress R for requisitionists.
But here's the catch. This victory came at a price. Because of the split, Indira Gandhi's government was now a minority in parliament. She was dependent on the support of other parties just to survive. So, in another incredibly bold move, she decided to dissolve parliament in late 1970 and call a snap election, a year ahead of schedule. She was going to take her case directly to the people of India.
And so the 1971 election essentially became a battle of slogans. The opposition, which was this big coalition called the Grand Alliance, had a very simple negative message. Indira Hatao. Remove Indira. But Indira Gandhi, she came back with something completely different. She offered a powerful, positive, and really catchy slogan. Garibi Hatao. Remove poverty. It was a direct promise to India's poor and marginalized that things were about to change.
So, did this massive gamble pay off? That brings us to our final section, the absolutely stunning outcome of that election and what it meant for the future of Indian politics.
The results weren't just a victory, they were a political landslide. As this chart shows, Indira Gandhi's alliance won a jaw-dropping 375 seats. That much-hyped Grand Alliance? A grand failure. And the old syndicate bosses? They were practically wiped out, reduced to just 16 seats. Her gamble hadn't just paid off, it paid off spectacularly.
And this is the most crucial part to understand. This was not a return to the old days of Congress dominance. This wasn't a restoration. What Indira Gandhi had actually pulled off was a complete reinvention of the party. It might have had the same name, but its inner workings, its support base, everything was fundamentally different.
Think about it like this. This new Congress was totally different from the party of her father, Nehru. It relied almost entirely on the massive popularity of one supreme leader, her. The party's own organizational structure was way weaker, and unlike the old Congress, which was like a big tent that could hold all sorts of different opinions, this new version couldn't really handle dissent. Its support base was also brand new, built on the votes of the poor, women, Dalits, and minorities who had all rallied behind her populist message.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really complex question. By steering the country through this dangerous decade and winning a massive mandate, it looked like Indira Gandhi had saved India's democracy when everyone thought it would fail. But in the process, she created a highly centralized party that revolved entirely around her own personality. So, had she saved Indian democracy? Or had she, without meaning to, planted the seeds for a very different kind of crisis that was still to come?